first off thank Secretary Mike Kennealy, the Secretary on Economic Development and Housing for the state of Massachusetts, and also Robert Nelson, who's the Massachusetts Director for the Small Business Administration. Both these people are, doing tremendous things for small businesses and businesses right here in the Merrimack Valley, as we'll learn shortly. But before we get started, I just want to introduce Joe Bevilacqua. And before I do that, I just want to mention also that we host 2 free webinars each and every week. We have a networking webinar that's coming up this Friday. We have 2 other great webinars coming up next week already scheduled. One with Google, one with Regis College on marketing. So make sure to check those out. And you can find out all the information. You can register completely free at merrimackvalleychamber.com. But with that being said, I want to turn over to Joe, who's the president and CEO of the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce. And thank you again for being part of this today.
Good morning, everyone. Let me say thank you to the Secretary and thank you to Bob. I just want you to know that we are talking to the Secretary and Bob Nelson every week. We're on conference calls together 2 or 3 times a week. But more importantly, before the virus hit, the Secretary and Bob Nelson were great friends of the Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce and the business community, working diligently to help the economy here in the Merrimack Valley and helping our business community. So I want to say thank you for their continuous support. I want to say thank you for them taking the time. Their schedules are absolutely horrendous because of all this. And I look forward to the discussion that is happening today with the businesses that are online. And thank you both. And thank you all for being part of this important program to help move our economy forward, help our small businesses, help our employees, and we'll all get out of this together. So thank you.
And I just want to mention that if anyone has any questions for either speakers, we're going to be holding all questions at the end. To ask a question, you'll simply type it in the chat feature of this webinar. But with that being said, I'd like to introduce Secretary Mike Kennealy, the Secretary of Economic Development for the state of Massachusetts. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Joe and team, and it's a pleasure to be with you all today. Really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk about the administration's taking, across the team, but also specifically, obviously, in our economic development engagement with the business. I would say to give you some flavor of what's happening, the Baker is an all-deck 24/7 proposition for all of us. As you may have seen, about a month of the formation of the COVID command center is meant to be a framework that can leverage the state government. It's led by Secretary Mary Lou Sutters, our Secretary of Health and Human Services, and there's a representative from each secretary who serves in the command center. I think that's proven to be a really effective way to coordinate activity and response across Secretariat and bring a lot of resources to bear to combat the pandemic and its across the Commonwealth. I think a couple weeks after the formation of the command center, the governor announced the formation of a COVID advisory group, which is truly some of the world's leading medical experts, including particular expertise in infectious diseases. So I think we have a very robust administration-wide response that truly is an effort to capture and utilize all the resources at our disposal. There's been a lot of guidance and orders about the way they ought to be operating during this time, and one of those clearly is to work from home wherever possible. And I will say the most of the executive branch is in that mode as well. So we're all trying to do our jobs, doing our jobs as best we can in a remote fashion on what we hope other companies will be doing. The governor's issued a number of orders and made a number of announcements really since the start of the pandemic, and clearly the stay-at-home advisory and the travel advisory and the ban on gatherings greater than 10 individuals, and obviously most important, most impactful for businesses are the closure of the physical locations of businesses deemed to be non-essential, and that's been an effort that my office has been heavily involved with, both in terms of communicating essential and non-essential, passing along some best practices for companies that are essential businesses that continue to operate physical locations, and trying to provide most up-to-date responses to frequently asked questions regarding essential versus non-essential. And if you go on mass.gov, there's a number of resources generally about our response to the pandemic. And if you look at the non-essential and essential business information, there's a lot there in terms of specifically what is deemed an essential business, and then a consistently updated, frequently asked questions document as well. And so we're trying to provide the best guidance we can. We now, I think, have received, since the start of this order a couple weeks ago, have now received about 8,000 inquiries regarding the order and its implications for our companies, and we are reading every single one of those. We don't have the bandwidth to reply to each one, but we're reading all those and updating this FAQ document where needed. So please, questions regarding the essential and please consult our website and look for the latest updates there. But we know this is having a major impact, obviously, on our economy. And I will say these measures are really, really important because, as the governor said a couple times now, he feels like we're reaching a point in time where the numbers are going to peak in terms of number of folks impacted by the virus directly. And he has estimated sometime between April 10th and April 20th. Here it is April 15th. Those numbers are dynamic and fluid and may change. But I say that as a way to emphasize that while there is clearly an economic impact of social distancing and limiting gatherings and closing physical locations of businesses, it is absolutely, in the governor's view, imperative that we do so to slow the spread of the virus. Now, that said, as Joe mentioned, and by the way, I want to thank Joe and team for their engagement throughout this whole process. They've, as always, in good times and bad, have been terrific partners for us. And as Joe mentioned, we've had a weekly call. We do a weekly call with all the chambers of commerce across the state and the other major business associations. We've had a couple of sort of interim calls as major events have transpired. So we have really endeavored to be in very close contact with the business community. And these calls have been, they've been, I think, very valuable for us, certainly to hear the feedback and hear the questions folks have, and a great forum for us to share news and keep people updated on the kind of steps we're trying to take. I will say, as Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, I've had a similar level of engagement on the housing side of my portfolio with a lot of the major housing groups, and there's clearly major challenges in both of those. But we are, as a secretariat, laser focused on trying to do what we can to minimize or address the economic impact of the state's steps we're taking to minimize the spread of the virus. And clearly, communication is first and foremost in that regard. We also have been very active helping to stand up and provide access to financing for our small companies. So very early on, feels like a long time ago now, our Mass Growth Capital Corporation organized a $10 million fund, supplemented with another $10 million to make a $20 million fund for loans to small companies. That fund was pretty quickly oversubscribed, and we have now been very actively working with the SBA to help our businesses access their programs. And I know Bob will spend some time on that one. First, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan product. Second, a kind of a bridge loan to that product, a grant program to the EIDL. Of course, in recent days, the Paycheck Protection Program. We've been very active on that one. That one, as you know, is implemented through our local banks, our SBA lenders, and other banks that are becoming new SBA lenders. And we have been active through our division of banks and other means to have an active dialogue with our banks and help and encourage them to implement the program. And I do want to thank Bob for his partnership and engagement during this process. If you look at historical norms of activity of SBA loans, what we're attempting to do now over a period of weeks is enormous relative to the volume that typically goes through the SBA. And it has not been without its challenges, but to have a program of this scale and somewhat complex be implemented over this period of time, I think folks have weathered that pretty well. And I want to compliment both Bob and the banks here in Massachusetts that have stepped up to help provide this financing to our small companies. We also very early on the governor announced that we will delay the remittance of local taxes, meals tax, and room tax that would have been due March 20th to June 20th. Another way to provide some financial help for our small businesses. There have been a number of other steps we've taken across the administration to help our companies and help their employees. So there have been some reforms to the unemployment insurance, namely a waiver of the 1 week waiting period typically associated with receiving those benefits. We've been very active working with our colleagues in the Labor and Workforce Development Secretariat, helping them spread the word about some of their programs with corporate layoffs, namely the Workshare program and the Rapid Response program. In my secretariat is the Division of Banks as well as the Division of Insurance, and we've had the commissioners of those divisions issue guidance to their constituents around encouraging flexibility both for banks and insurance companies and their work with their consumers, their customers, both individual and businesses during this period of time. On the housing side of my world, there's a lot of challenges there, namely around trying to ensure housing stability for folks during this period of time. And there's been guidance from the Division of Banks with respect to suspending mortgage foreclosures, guidance from our Department of Housing and Community Development with respect to suspending evictions for folks who operate low income during this period of time. That includes both our public housing authorities and nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing developers. So there have been a lot of steps we tried to take as state government to help mitigate some of these impacts. And I'll close on by talking about something that is good news during this challenging time and a positive step we've taken around manufacturing. So as you may have read in the press, there has been a shortage of personal protective equipment, PPE, for our healthcare providers and first responders. And through the Advanced Manufacturing Collaborative, which I'm proud to co-chair with Mike Tomasi, one of our manufacturing CEOs, we have stood up an emergency response team to help our manufacturers manufacture PPE when they otherwise might be manufacturing other products. And it's been a really successful early start to this program where literally hundreds of manufacturers have come forward and say we want to manufacture face shields and masks and gowns and other products that our healthcare system needs. And one of those, of course, is a company in Lawrence called 99 Degrees, where the CEO, Brendan Schneider, and joined the governor and me a couple of days ago to announce that they're going to now be manufacturing gowns as needed by our medical system. So that is getting some early traction. And again, I just highlights how our business community can rally and work together to help important challenges. So I'll close my comments there. Look forward to your questions, and thank you again to Joe and his team for their partnership. And as Joe said, we will get through this, and we'll get through it together. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Kennealy. We appreciate those words and you doing all the great work for the state of Massachusetts. You and your team's leadership has been instrumental in helping the state start to get back on its feet from this pandemic. And as we continue to grow through this, it will become more essential as we go through. So thank you again. We appreciate that. As I said, we'll be saving questions for the very end. So with that being said, I want to introduce the Robert Nelson with the Massachusetts SBA. He is the director. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mike and Joe, for holding this meeting this morning and for inviting the secretary and myself to be part of the conversation. The Merrimack Valley Chamber of Commerce has been such a strong partner of the SBA over many, many years, and I just applaud everything that you do to support small businesses and to support the SBA. It's a wonderful partnership, and looking forward to it continuing for many more years. But certainly, Mr. Secretary, appreciate your kind words and your comments and your support as we've been working through this over a number of weeks in order to try to help our small businesses to survive and to recover. So thank you again for what the governor and your office are doing to support small businesses and the SBA. So I figured I would start off with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program, which came into effect in Massachusetts on March 18th. We were one of the early states who had a full statewide declaration due to the efforts of Secretary Kennealy's office and the governor. And what that did is we immediately started encouraging our small businesses and private nonprofits to apply for economic injury disaster loans. Since Massachusetts got that full statewide declaration, all 50 states and territories have statewide declarations. So there is a tremendous amount of volume for people who are applying for economic injury loans. So what you should know about economic injury loans, they are working capital loans. They're applied for through SBA at sba.gov/disaster. It right now is a very easy, streamlined, secure process for small businesses and nonprofits to apply for loans of up to $2 million. The interest rate is 3.75% for small businesses, 2.75% for nonprofits, with terms as long as 30 years. I continue to see economic injury loan approvals every day. It's one of the first things I do when I wake up. I check to see what came through over the previous day. And so we continue to see economic injury loans approved. I know that economic injury loans have been funded, with small businesses getting those funds from the SBA. What people should know is that the economic injury loan program, it has a deadline to apply, which is in December. So businesses who get approved for a loan, they might not know what the full extent of their economic injury is and how long this goes. With the EIDL loans, there's the ability to request increases. So just know that the economic injury program is a long-term recovery program. And so folks, there doesn't have to be a rush to apply, but I would, if you're interested in it, get your name in, get the application in, and get in the queue. There really is a tremendous volume, and it is on a first-come, first-served basis. But the economic injury loan, it provides working capital to businesses to pay obligations that they would have been able to pay had they not, had we not had this disaster. So you can use it for all different sorts of working capital needs. But I wanted to shift to the passage of the CARES Act. And so with the CARES Act, the SBA was allotted some funding in order to provide some grant money to small businesses. So with the economic injury disaster loan, through that portal, a small business and nonprofit can request a advance, which does not have to be repaid. We came out with guidance to everyone that the way that SBA is calculating that is $1,000 per employee up to $10,000 max. It's the way that SBA determined that it would be able to help the most people across the country, given the tremendous demands on the advance grant, just because it is free money. So I know that we got communication last Thursday that the advanced grants would start funding within 24 hours. So that would have been on Friday. I know that funds have been released for those advanced grants. It's going out in batches, and it is continuing. I did get word from Lisa Gonzalez-Welsh, who's my economic development specialist up in the Northeast, and she was communicating with the Center for Women in Enterprise and sharing good news about folks receiving those advanced grants. So those are still available for you to apply. So if you're interested in that, I would go to sba.gov/disaster and to apply for the advanced grant, which is available through that. So the next thing I wanted to shift to is the Paycheck Protection Plan program. So we received information yesterday as far as the statewide numbers and also the national numbers as of the end of the day on the 13th. And on a national level, over 1 million loan approvals, PPP, for just under $250 billion. That was as of the 13th. And as Secretary Kennealy mentioned, in SBA's best year, we did $30 billion, and we will be doing $350 billion in a matter of a few short weeks. So it really is amazing when I look at it. It is historic. If you look at the Massachusetts numbers, over 27,000 approvals of PPP loans, over $7 billion. This is just Massachusetts. And I absolutely have to applaud all the banks, because this program, it's the PPP, the small business applies with the lender. They're applying for 2.5 times their average monthly payroll cost, but the loan is only possible with the help of the bank. And so when you look at 27,000 approvals in the matter of a short period of time, I can tell you that banks worked and credit unions, banks worked overnight, over weekends, a tremendous amount of hours trying to work with the best guidance that we had available to them in order to put through these applications and to get the funds reserved for those small businesses. So under the PPP program, we give the lender a 100% guarantee for incentive for them to make the loan. As far as the small business and private nonprofit, there's no personal guarantee required. There's no collateral required. The funds are exactly as the title. Getting some feedback. It's exactly as the title notes. Can we do anything about that?
Bob, if you could turn off your volume.
Where do I do that?
On your computer. I don't know if you can use that button.
Yeah, I didn't touch anything, but hopefully that helps. So is that better? There's still an echo someplace, but I'll continue. So under the PPP program, we give the bank 100% guarantee from the SBA. As I mentioned, no personal signatures, no collateral required. It is a paycheck protection program. The process is the small business works with a SBA lender, and once the lender submits the application to the SBA, it's an immediate approval by the SBA. And then the bank has 10 days in order to fund and to close on the PPP loan. So this is the next stage of all the work that is being done by these banks, that they're all working very hard to get the documentation in order to be able to close and to fund these loans. And again, this is something that is happening. I know that small businesses are getting their PPP funding. And so again, this is good news with light at the end of the tunnel as far as this capital that is starting to make its way into the hands of small businesses in order to help them to survive and recover. So with the Paycheck Protection Program, for sole proprietors, single person businesses, they became eligible to apply for PPP on April 10th. And so SBA released some additional interim final rules yesterday. So if there are businesses out there that are sole employee businesses, they're trying to figure out, how much of a loan they can get, how do they document it. This is all in the new interim final rules that have been released. So I would suggest that folks review that document, but in very simple terms, if it's a single person business, what SBA is looking for you to do, if you've completed your 2019 tax returns and you have your Schedule C, your net income on line 31, you're basically taking 1/12 of that for your average, and you're multiplying that by 2.5 times. So that's a simple math equation for those types of businesses, but the interim final rules does get into some additional guidance in how that works. So again, I would suggest that you look at the information that is posted on SBA's website at sba.gov/paycheck protection, or certainly you could go to Treasury's website. If you just go to treasury.gov, you'll easily be able to see where you can click for COVID-19 information, and all of the information is posted there. As far as the FAQs, which continued, it's a living document. FAQs continue to get added onto that document almost on a daily basis. So, over the last couple of days, we've received a tremendous amount of clarity as far as closing these loans, funding these loans, but certainly a lot of information just came out for sole proprietorships and single employee businesses as far as how this works for them. So for businesses that have not completed their 2019 tax returns, what SBA wants them to do is to fill out the tax document and to use that as your tool in calculating what your net income is for 2019. And then even though you haven't filed the 2019, but you will be filing the 2019, use that net income as the basis for the loan amount that you'll be going for. And again, 2.5 times that. But with the Paycheck Protection Program, what the purpose is to try to get people back on the payrolls if they've been furloughed or let go, or for businesses that have not furloughed or let people go, to maintain their payroll. So the PPP program provides 8 weeks worth of payroll cost. The clock starts ticking at the initial disbursement of the loan by the bank. And it has the potential to be 100% forgiven if you're able to get employees back onto the payroll or to maintain your payrolls. We're looking at the June 30th date. And June 30th is actually the deadline for applications for PPP loans. But I guess I'll stop there and we can get into Q&A. But let me just mention one other thing, and that's the SBA debt relief program. And that also became available as part of the CARES Act under the debt relief. And this is where Massachusetts is going to receive a real significant benefit, and the small businesses here in Massachusetts. With the debt relief program, SBA will be paying 6 months worth of payments on existing SBA borrowers' loans. And that's on our 7A program, that's on our 504 program, on the microloan program, for businesses that are looking to apply for new 7A guaranteed loans or a 504 loan or a microloan. SBA will also be paying 6 months worth of payments on those loans. I think through an application period that goes out through September. So Massachusetts, definitely one of the most productive offices in the entire country in terms of existing SBA borrowers and the activity that we do. So, a tremendous economic impact with SBA paying 6 months worth of their payments on their existing SBA loans. So I'll stop there and we can get into Q&A, but appreciate what all the small businesses are going through. I know deeply the challenges and the struggles over the past 3 weeks. It has been a constant stream of emails and phone calls from small businesses, talking about the challenges that they're facing and their desperate need for capital in order to be able to make payroll, to meet obligations. And, with these SBA programs, it is a lifeline in order to try to help these small businesses to recover. And when we get the all clear and can go back to work, businesses are not going to be starting from scratch. They'll have their employees that have been on the payroll and can get back to business as soon as possible. That's the whole purpose of the PPP program. So thank you, Mike and Joe.
Thank you, Bob, and we want to thank everyone at the SBA for all their help throughout this whole process. Can you see the questions coming in on the chat, or would you like me to read them off?
Yeah, if you want to help and read the questions for Secretary Kennealy and myself, okay. That would be helpful. Okay,
I'll start now with going from the top down, and whoever wants to jump on those, Bob or Mike, feel free to answer those. The first one I see is, what can the Commonwealth do to help develop more affordable housing, to encourage developers, cities, and towns to add more housing?
Well, I'll take that one. Developing more affordable housing has been a really core focus of ours now since the start of the administration. Before this current pandemic, we were using the words housing crisis to describe where we were in terms of housing in Massachusetts. We have had in the last 30 years less than half the rate of housing production we had in the prior 30 years. We've had, and again, these comments will be more specific to the time period before the pandemic, but growth in our economy and our population and our workforce that's far outstripped the growth in our housing production. And so this has been a real problem for us for a long time. And it's why the governor, about a couple years ago, signed the largest housing bond bill in the history of the state, a $1.8 billion housing bill. It's why we've invested $1.1 billion to create nearly 16,000 new affordable units across the state. You know, there's a lot of ways that affordable housing gets created. Part of it is the marketplace itself creating housing that's affordable for the population it's trying to serve. Part of it is government investment and subsidies to create deeply affordable housing. And we've been as active, more active in that regard than any prior administration. That $1.1 billion is about 20% higher than in any other 4-year period in history of the state. So we've been very active in doing that, and we'll continue to do it. I know one thing we're very actively monitoring now is the status of the various construction projects underway to create that affordable housing. And obviously, there are challenges now in getting those projects done, but we're very actively monitoring their progress and seeing what gaps arise that we may need to fill. But long way of saying, in the current crisis, very actively looking at the projects that are underway because we need that housing. And before the pandemic and more normal times, we really had a real problem in that regard as well in terms of needing more affordable units. And we've been very active through our Department of Housing and Community Development, through mass housing and other areas to get more affordable units online. But I will say it will continue to be a focus for us, pre and during and post-pandemic.
Thank you. The next question is, what's the status of unemployment benefits for self-employed and independent contractors?
I'm going to try to field that one. And I should have said at the outset that I would anticipate some questions of employment insurance, and those are probably will be most adequately fielded by my colleagues in labor and workforce development. And we can try to get some information out to the chamber to distribute to members, but it's my understanding, and maybe something more about this, but through the CARES Act, there are unemployment benefits for folks that are self-employed. And I know the state is working working around the clock, frankly, to make sure we can deliver those federal benefits as soon as we can. But it is a provision in the CARES Act. It does require, frankly, like the PPP does, it does require a local delivery system. And I know my colleagues in labor and workforce and other parts of state government are working very actively to make sure that delivery system happens. But that is a provision in the federal CARES Act.
Thank you. Then there's some questions here on the EIDL. One person saying lots of confusion how that amount will be determined. Another person was saying, will the emergency loans be limited to 1,000 employee or versus the initial 10,000 limits? Can you touch up on that?
So again, the EIDL loan advance is different than the economic injury disaster loan. So the EIDL loan advance is calculated at 1,000 per employee, 10,000 max. The actual economic injury disaster loan, it's worked on by a case manager and a loan officer at the loan processing center. They're going to help you to determine what the economic injury is, what the initial loan amount that they would be willing to make and to give to the small business. But again, remember what I said, that there can be increases to economic injury loans as things progress and, as businesses and nonprofits learn the full extent of their economic injury. But the economic injury loan is not based upon employee count. The advance is, and that does not have to be repaid. But as far as the economic injury loan itself, it's have you suffered economic injury? What is the extent of your economic injury? What is your ability to repay? SBA will look at all those things, determine the initial loan amount that they would be making. And again, there would be the opportunities to get subsequent increases in advances on the economic injury loan. Those go up to $2 million.
Thank you. Another question for you, Bob, is someone said, how long before you hear from the SBA after applying for the loan? We applied in March and have not heard anything.
Right. So as I mentioned, the SBA processes the economic injury disaster loans on a first come, first served basis. And since Massachusetts got its full statewide declaration on March 18th, the entire country has been applying for economic injury loans and the advance grants. And initially what SBA was telling us was that it could be 21 days for a decision on those economic injury loans. I know that we were getting decisions on some of these much sooner than the 21 days, but now that the entire country, there is extreme demand and tremendous volume of applications that the disaster center is working on. So, but the other guidance that we had been told, 21 days for a decision, and then an extra 5 to 7 days for closing and funding of those loans. And this is why the PPP is a good program, because you're working with small business, you're working with SBA lenders here. They get an immediate approval from the SBA. They're here in the community, and they can fund these loans very quickly in order to get money into the pockets of small businesses so that they can start making those payrolls and getting people back on the payroll.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's definitely huge volumes, Mike. I don't have to tell you. And if you really think of the entire country being involved with a disaster, and the number of small businesses and nonprofits that are out there looking to access these funds, it really is a very, very huge task.
Yeah, it's not just one city and not one town, it's the whole country all at once. So I can imagine how that's going right now. But thank you again for that. Another question on the PPP is one of our members asked, our organization has 130 employees, has been shut down by state mandate. All revenue is stopped. The PPP program requires me to bring back employees despite the mandate not to work. As a result, we will incur costs that are not covered under forgiveness programs, specifically federal taxes, workers' compensation over $99,000. Originally, the loan forgiveness was going to be based on 8-week period between 2016 to 6/30. Is now an 8-week period that begins the day I receive the funds. I will have zero revenue coming in to offset the additional costs. So we just had questions about that.
Right, and so that's the way the program is set up. That upon the initial disbursement, there's the 8 weeks, and the clock starts ticking. So some businesses that are not essential businesses and are not operating, they wonder about bringing employees back onto the payroll and what those employees should be doing. And so if the employer has things for that employee to do, and the business is not an essential business and they're not open, they bring them back on the payroll. There's nothing in the law that says that that employee has to actually be doing something, but they're back on the payroll. They're off of unemployment. I understand that there might be additional cost to the small business for this, but when you look at the ability to retain your workforce or to bring your workforce back, so that when we get the okay, you're not starting from scratch at that point in time. But it's all trying to figure out what is the best program for you. But if you have concerns, this was a part of the CARES Act, which was approved by Congress and the Senate and signed by the president. So if you have concerns, guidance continues to come out, and we get new information on a daily basis. And so there could be changes that will come out from Treasury and SBA. As soon as we get this information, we push it out to our Gov delivery list, which is well over 50,000 names in Massachusetts, in order to get you the information that we know. I want you to know exactly what we know at any point in time. So we did a Gov delivery distribution yesterday. One went out again this morning with the update to the new interim final rules, which I think really does provide a lot of clarity on a lot of different issues. But I hear the concerns, but that's what the PPP is about, is getting these employees back on the payroll if they've been off the payroll, but maintaining payrolls at a level so that 100% of the loan can be forgiven. You don't want to take on additional debt. You want to make sure that you're complying with the program requirements so that 100% of this loan, including interest, is forgiven.
Thank you very much. Secretary Kennealy, I think there's a question that's more for you. One of the members wanted to know if the state and local government's working on any guidelines for restaurants to reopen, and how are we safely going to social distance employees, guests? Is this even possible in most restaurants?
Yeah, that's a good question. The answer to the first part of the question is no, we're not quite there yet. And as the governor said now a couple of times in his press conferences in recent days, I know the topic of reopening. We know it's top of mind for a lot of folks, and frankly, we're just not there yet. We're probably, as I said, at the most critical time in terms of where the numbers may peak. And so we really are at this point trying to stay laser focused on managing the public health emergency, and then in our world trying to manage the economic consequences of that. At some point, we will have a discussion about reopening, and reopening meaning, timing, on what basis, what are new workplace guidelines, how should businesses engage with their customers. We will clearly need to have industry at the table for those discussions, but we're just not there right now.
Thank you. Bob, I think there's a question here for you. Lots of questions from nonprofits over 500 employees. They think they are subject to SBA exemption table that includes revenue limits. Others think the only test for a nonprofit is number of employees, which is correct.
So there's a number of ways that a business can make the determination that it is a small business. So 500 employees or less is one way to do it, but depending on the businesses or the nonprofit's industry classification code, if it's revenue-based and you fall under the size standard for that, then you would be considered a small business and eligible to apply. There's also what SBA has is an alternative size standard. So it's 5 million of net income over a 2-year period average and a $15 million net worth. And so if you're able to meet both of those tests under the alternative size standard, then that's another way that you could qualify as a small business, even though you might have more than 500 employees.
Thank you. And a couple of questions here from people who are S corporations as one employee or just self-employed themselves. Are they eligible for no repayments, grants, and loans? And what would the limit of the grant be?
Yeah, so certainly sole proprietorships, single-owned businesses, independent contractors, they're all eligible to apply for both a PPP loan and also an economic injury disaster loan, and to request the advance. If it is a single-person business, under the advance, it would be $1,000. So it's the owner is the one employee, so that's what they would get for that advance amount.
I see some more questions about self-employed businesses. Do you have anything to add for anyone who is self-employed?
I would suggest strongly that they look at the new interim final rules that were released yesterday. And Mike, I can send you the document. I think it's a 19-page document, but pretty easy reading, similar to the interim final rules that came out with the release of the program. So it provides a lot of clarity as far as, how to calculate the amount of the loan, how the forgiveness would be calculated. But certainly doing your homework and looking at this document, I think will be very helpful for you. But I guess one of the other things that I'll put in a plug for now while we're at it is, don't forget SBA's technical assistance partners. We have a robust SBDC, Small Business Development Center Network, SCORE organization, and our Women's Center. They're all working remotely, but they're working with businesses on these applications and on these questions. So this is free advice. And so, different businesses are working with accountants and lawyers, and, if you're a small business, you could certainly work with SBA's resource partners in order to help them learn about the rules and how things work. So definitely, we have people here that can help. And I at this time, I'll also put in a plug for the grant recipients under Mass Growth Capital's Technical Assistance Program. They have a number of grantees all across the state who, again, are looking at this and trying to help small businesses to navigate and to get the best answers for different questions. And one of the things that Mass Growth Capital is in the process of doing is translating the instructions into a number of different languages, because we do want to make sure that all communities have access and opportunity and know how to access these programs. So I think that is really important. So at SBA, we're working closely with Mass Growth Capital and Larry Andrews and Allison. But there's a team of folks here to help and to try to provide the best answers. If there are businesses out there who have general questions, what we ask that you do is that you send an email to the Massachusetts District Office General Mailbox, and that would be MassachusettsDO@sba.gov, and the DO stands for District Office. But if you have specific questions and real important issues, feel free to email me directly, and I'll get involved and try to be as helpful as I can. My email is rhnelson@sba.gov. And, on the SBA website, you have a listing of all of our employees. It has our cell phones. Every single SBA staff person has an SBA cell phone device. They're all accessible. And I can tell you, my team has been really working in overdrive, especially on the lender relations side with all of these loan programs and trying to get our banks set up with electronic systems. I can tell you that over the last week, we've had 20 or so new PPP lenders approved in Massachusetts. So if you go onto the Massachusetts website at sba.gov/MA, you'll see the lenders who have been given the authority to do PPP loans in Massachusetts. But one other thing that I'll share with you is that I learned just a couple days ago is that there are some national fintech companies that are now processing PPP applications. So if there are businesses or nonprofits out there whose bank is not currently participating or they're just in the process of trying to stand up their program, you could certainly, the three names that I received was Intuit, Square, and PayPal. So in our Gov delivery that we put out this morning, we put links to those three organizations. Certainly you could apply for the PPP through those national fintech companies.
Thank you, Director Nelson. We appreciate you being part of this webinar this morning and for all your insight and for your team's work throughout the entire SBA through this whole pandemic. We appreciate that. Secretary Kennealy, is there anything you'd like to add as well before we close off?
No, I guess a couple of points. One is we clearly recognize the impact this is having on the business community, and we're trying to do all we can to mitigate the very short-term impacts. And at some point, we will have a discussion about reopening the economy and what the path forward is. It just not the right time right now, but I know it's something that's on people's minds, and we'll do whatever we can to manage these short-term consequences. But secondly, I just add that it's conversations like this and the engagement of the chamber and many other players that will really ultimately help shape the solutions here and help carve the path forward. It's just so essential to us in our work to have these discussions, to hear your questions, and have your partnership with us. So thank you for the chance to be with you all today.
Thank you again to Secretary Kennealy. I want to thank Robert Nelson, the director of the Massachusetts SBA, for your teams, for all of your help with this pandemic so far and going forward as well. As we said, we will get through this together. The Merrimack Valley Chamber will have a number of other webinars specifically designed for you and your businesses. You can find out more about these free webinars on merrimackvalleychamber.com. You can also feel free to email the office at merrimackvalleychamber.com. And our President Joe Bevelak is going to close out.
I just want to say thank you once again to the Secretary, the SBA Director. I want you to recognize their schedules, how overwhelmed they are, but they took the time to work with the Merrimack Valley business community. I want to say thank you. For those that were on the line that was watching us, participated, that asked questions, if you thought it was helpful, let us know. Send the chamber an email, put it on Facebook, however you communicate on social media. Let people know that there really is assistance out there and that people really want to help you move your business forward. Mr. Secretary, Mr. SBA Director, we want to say thank you once again. We look forward to being part of the effort that helps you make the determination as to when businesses may be able to reopen and put our communities back together. But in the meantime, we want to say thank you once again. I want to say thank you to Ray Ann and to Michael who helped put this webinar program together. As you know, I can't do it, and I have to rely upon their great skills, and I want to say thank you. And again, thank you to all the people that participated. Together, we'll get through this, and our economy will come back stronger than ever. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Mike and Joe, you are both champions. Mike, if there are questions that were in the chat box that we didn't get to, if you do want to shoot them to me, we'll get you answers so that you can get them out to the participants on this morning's call. But thank you for what you guys are doing.
Bob, I did send you one. I got one that someone had emailed me, and I did send it to you. So whenever you have a chance, take a look at it.
You got it,
Thank you
John.
once again.
And
Thank you.
thank you, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Mike,